Hey kids, Flexing Teacher Weber here. Hope you're having a good day. We have been studying topics in measurement, and the last thing we're going to do this year is study circles, some important properties of circles. What we're going to do today is a little circle investigation. Now, if I would have had you in class, I would have actually had you doing this sort of thing, but I won't actually have you do the circle investigation because it would involve you needing to have some string and some rulers and things like that and pictures of circles, and I just am not able to get that information to you. So, this is what we would have done. We would have started talking about circles. So, three important things to know about circles. Something called the circumference of the circle. The circumference of the circle is the perimeter of the circle. Perimeter meaning the distance around. So, when you're thinking of the circumference of the circle, think of the distance around the circle. This is the part I'm just sketching right now. If you can see that little flashing light, that represents the circumference of the circle. And normally when we're talking about algebra equations, we represent circumference with a capital C. Another important part of a circle we need to talk about is something called the diameter of the circle. Diameter we represent with a small d. Now the diameter is a line that goes through the center of the circle from one edge of the circle to the other. So what I'm just outlining right now with the flashing light represents the diameter of the circle. Now a diameter has to go through the center of the circle. So doing this would not represent the diameter of a circle because it's not going through the center of the circle. Okay? And there's more than just, like, I could draw this in any place, right? I could draw the diameter here, just as long as it goes through the center of the circle from one edge to the other. All right? So diameter, small d. Last thing I want to talk about on this page is the radius. What I'm sketching right here is the radius of the circle. Now the radius goes from the center of the circle to the edge, but it's really half the size of the diameter, right? The radius is half the diameter. And radius we represent in algebra with a small r. So circumference, the distance around, diameter, from one edge of the circle to the other through the center, and radius is half the diameter. All right? So those are three important parts of a circle you need to know about. Now what we would have done next is we would have done a little circle investigation. Now on the next 3 pages there are 6 circles. For each circle I measured their circumference with string and then measured the length with a ruler. So to measure the circumference or the perimeter of each of those circles, on the next following pages, I took a piece of string and put the string around the circle and then measured the length that went around, and that's how I calculated the circumference of each of the circles. I also measured the diameter of each circle, and I recorded the results in a chart to find a pattern. Now let's see the results. So on this page there are 2 circles. Now what I would have done in circle 1 is I would have taken a piece of string, measured the distance around, and then measured that length with a ruler. That's called the circumference. And I would have measured the diameter. And same thing on circle 2, I would have measured the distance around using a piece of string and then measuring the string and measured the diameter. And I did that on circles 3 and 4 again. I would have measured, or you would have been doing this in class, measure the distance around and then measure the diameter. Measure the distance around, measure the diameter. Same thing here. I would have taken the string, measured the distance around, and measured the diameter. Same thing here. Take a piece of string, measure the distance around, and measure the diameter. And I recorded all these results in a chart. So here's the chart. So there were 6 circles. In the first circle, the circumference was 17.4. The diameter was 4.5. When I divided the circumference by the diameter, I got 3.87. I had to round it off to 2 decimal spots. For the next circle, I got 37.2 divided by 12. And I got an answer of about 3.10 centimeters. The next one, 12.2 divide by 4.2, and I got 2.9 centimeters. And then you can see the results for the next one. The next one, the circumference divided by the diameter was 3.40. This one was 3.16, and this was 3.74. In all these cases, I was rounding off to 2 decimal spots. Now, there's always going to be a certain degree of error in my measurements because I was taking a piece of string and putting it around the circles and then measuring the string, and sometimes I was off a little bit in my measurements. But if I would have done my measurements perfectly, no matter what the size of the circle, when I did my circumference divided by diameter, I always should get a number that's very close to 3.14. Now, the pattern here in this column is that they were all the numbers were really close. Okay, C divided by D was close to 3 centimeters, right? Every time. If I did it exactly, I should always get an answer of approximately about 3.14. And you've probably heard of that number before. That number is called pi. This ratio of circumference divided by diameter was discovered by the Greeks and is called the Greek letter pi. We spell that pi. The symbol for pi is that symbol right there. Now, normally how I draw it is I make a little, almost like a little, I don't know, a little small arc like that, and then I give it 2 little legs. And that's the symbol for pi, which is approximately 3.14. Now, it's actually 3.14 and a bunch of numbers that don't go in a pattern. It's called a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal. Now, I'm going to give you a couple pages I'd like you to read about pi today, so you'll learn more about it. But basically, pi is the circumference of any circle divided by the diameter, and you will always get approximately 3.14. So one of the things I'm going to get you to do today is read a little bit about what pi is and get some more information about pi. The last thing I want to do is, why does this matter? Well, we've been studying math equations, and pi can be used to develop a math equation so that we can calculate the circumference of a circle. So let me show you what I mean by that. So what we discovered today is that if you want to figure out, if you take circumference and you divide by the diameter, you will always get pi. Or, if I want to write it the other way around, pi is always equal to the circumference of a circle divided by the diameter. Now, there's a math equation we can do to figure out the circumference of a circle. If I want to figure out the circumference of a circle, I want to get pi, or c, by itself. I want to make this c by itself. Well, let's think about what we would do with math equations. If I want to get this c by itself, and I have a divide by d, well, the way I would make that divide by d go away is I would multiply by d. So I'd multiply by d right here. And if I do it to that side, I have to do it to this side. So I could multiply this side by d. Now, remember, we don't use multiplication signs to show multiplication. We just put the letter beside it. Normally we put parentheses, right? So times d times d. I do that to both sides of the equal sign. Let's see what we get. Well, I get pi times diameter equals this d and this d cancel off. Circumference. Or, the other way I could write this as circumference equals pi times diameter. And now, I have a math equation I can use to calculate the circumference of a circle. If I want to figure out the circumference of a circle, I just measure the diameter and multiply it by 3.14, and that will give me the circumference of a circle. That's what we're going to be doing in the upcoming days. Today, what I would like you to do is, after watching this video, I would like you to read the information I've given you about pi, and I would like you to listen to the story, Circumference and the Dragon of Pi. That's all for today. Flexing Teacher Weber, out.